Welcome, everyone, to the F6P DFS Kickoff Show with your boys. I'm Keith Flemming and Joe the Brain Matz. Last week, we did not do a full slate show, but we did have the Thanksgiving one with both Chris Detroit Beastie and Dave Eddy. That's at Corporal Eddie. And we kind of killed it, if I must say. I guess with the powers combined, Joe. Right. We kind of dominated, man. Some really good stuff. Your Deebo Samuel play, I'm very flustered about, not because it went off, because you're very smart. A lot of plays you do, but if I'd have had him instead of Robinson in my main cash lineup, it would have been a really good day, because that lineup actually cashed in a lot of them anyway, and the difference of those two players was like 20 points. But great call by you. But this week we're going to be previewing Week 13 on DraftKings. If you were listening for the first time, we give two plays on DK at each position, a median and a value. They have to be 6,900 or below. And real quickly before we get started, just to remind everyone to be sure to follow both of us. My Twitter is at Keith Flemming. Joe's is at Joe, an extra E, Matz, M-A-T-Z. Be sure to follow Fantasy Six Pack if you're not. And then be sure, if you want all the great Fantasy Six Pack coverage, you can become a premium member at Fantasy Six Pack. It's very affordable. You get full access to all the contributors on Discord, all their rankings and tools. It's a great deal. You can right now get 10% off if you use F6P NFL promo code. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We are here to talk about Week 13. Let's get right into it with our QB plays. I'll go ahead and tell you, Joe, I think QB's tough this week. I had a really kind of difficult time settling in because I wanted to give two guys basically around 6K in price, but I also wanted to give a lower price play. So I ended up going with Russell Wilson, 5,800 as my median play. And don't look now, Russell Bustle is back.
Yeah.
He is running to a shocking amount. I had no idea he is running as much as he had. He's got over 290 yards on the season, 30 yards or more in 5 of his last 7. So what does that always do, Joe? That raises that floor. We like that very much. He's already eclipsed his passing touchdown total from last season by 4 with 6 games remaining. He has 7 less picks. We were laughing at this Denver Broncos team 4 or 5 weeks in, not long after the Miami debacle, I guess is what we'll call it. Now, all of a sudden, is Denver a frisky team? We'll find out this week as they go on the road to the Houston Texans. Houston is not a great pass defense. You've been able to get on at them. They're 27th against opposing QBs. And I really do think this game is going to be kind of a sneaky shootout. And I like Russell a lot, mainly because he's indoors. And we've reached that time of the year where if I can get a QB or a receiver indoors and not have to worry about potentially bad weather, I like that, because that means that's just one less thing I have to check on Sunday, or a variable that we don't have to account for. But again, Russell Bustle is back. He scored 17 points or more in 5 of his last 6. He's averaging over 18 points his last 4 games on DK. I like him a lot, 5,800 as my median QB.
Yeah. And the thing, too, about that Broncos team is the offense has functioned relatively well this entire year. The problem was, especially in one game, they gave up 70 points. So, yeah, now that the defense has turned around, that team might actually just be a good football team, lo and behold.
And a wide open
I'm
AFC.
going to go. I mean, it seems to get more wide open because Kansas City can't catch passes. I do have an interesting stat on that, and then maybe I'll share later when we get to the wide receivers. But yeah, then Mark Andrews is hurt. Joe Burrow's gone. The Bills probably won't make the playoffs. Who knows? But I'll go with the quarterback of a team that I feel quite confident is good, and that's Brock Purdy, the San Francisco 49ers. Again, Brock Purdy, he has the full complement of weapons now. And this is a game where I'm going to assume, as good as their defense is, they will have to score points to win because they're playing the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, notably, they are favorites in this game.
What the hell is going on with that?
The truth is, the advanced stats, they like the Eagles. They think they're a good team. They think they're like the 5th or 6th best team, though.
I think that's maybe the toughest place to play in the NFL right now, though.
That's true. And plus, I don't expect them to just run away with this game. Although, if you look at Brock Purdy, he's kind of, it doesn't really matter how the other team does.
Yep.
Like, sometimes they score 40, the other team scores 10, because Shanahan doesn't care. He's going to score points no matter what. And if they have to play catch-up, cool. It's Brock Purdy throwing more. And the reality is with the Eagles this season, the pass defense isn't awful when you adjust for they've had a very difficult schedule where last year's team kind of coasted on an easy schedule for much of the year. But regardless of the schedule, only one team has given up more passing touchdowns, and that's the Washington Commanders. So the Eagles, 23 touchdowns allowed passing in 11 games so far, so over 2 a game. 3,027 yards. Only 3 teams have given up more yardage. And one of those is, again, the Commanders, who played an extra game compared to the Eagles. So this is, by just counting stats, this is a bottom 5 pass defense. And on DK, they're 31st. So to me, you've got a defense that is okay, but if you have to pass on them, you can't. And I expect they will have to do some passing because the Eagles' run defense is still pretty good. They've got a lot of beast guys on the defensive line, as we know. I mean, they're so good they just cut who is it? Was it Barnett?
I know you're talking, Barnett or Burnett or
I'm blanking on his name. I should remember.
Ernie. I don't know.
God knows he's one of the 7 guys who's terrorized Giants QBs the last 8 years. But yeah, the point is this team is so deep. Defensive line, they can just cut guys in the middle of the season. The problems have been on the back end where they've pretty much replaced almost the entire team outside of the 2 starting corners. So, yeah, I just think this is a defense you can take advantage of. You've got the best complement of weapons and offensive line, I think, in the entire league that Brock Purdy gets to play with, as well as the 1st or 2nd best offensive play caller. So, yeah, I think this is a game where he's scoring us 25 points, whether they win or lose. So I feel good about Brock.
I love that play. The other thing you did not mention, revenge game, right? Like, remember what happened to Brock
especially
Purdy.
for Brock, who
that's what I'm saying, in that NFC title game. So I have a feeling Brock, who definitely has a chip on his shoulder. It's one of the things I really like about him is his confidence and, poise. And I think he's going to want to go out there and cook. So I really do like that play. That was the other guy that I was going to include with Russell when I was talking about. But again, I wanted to give a cheaper play for my value. I'm going to go with Bryce Young, 4,900 at Tampa Bay. The Bucs' pass defense is atrocious. It is. I mean, I know you've had a couple of games, including, the Will Levis and Gardner Minshew recently, where they did okay. But the real reason I like Bryce here is where the Bucs struggle the most in pass defense is in the slot. Adam Thielen, by far his best receiver, lines up in the slot, the 2nd most in the NFL. I expect Thielen to have another one of those monster games that he's had about 6 or 7 this year. And if you look at it, that has been the theme, is when he plays teams that struggle defending receivers in the slot, he plays really well. Last week, he played the best team in the NFL defending slot receivers, the Tennessee Titans. That was why Bryce struggled so much. That was why Thielen did. And the other issue is the Panthers' defense sucks. I mean, it's really bad. I expect Tampa to kind of have a get-right game. Rashad White's got a great matchup. Evans always seems to torch them. So I think they're going to be a situation where they have to throw a lot. And the Bucs are still a team that's really difficult to run on. So I just think he's going to get a lot of volume too. But I actually do like Bryce Young if you're looking for, an MME or a streamer play at 4,900.
Yeah, we'll also see if that offense changes, hopefully for the positive, with Frank Reich gone now. And he had given up play calling duties, taken them back. None of it seemed to be working. So hopefully we see some life. Obviously, I don't think it's quite as guaranteed as Matt Canada being gone from the Steelers, where we're all like, has to be better. And then they immediately get 400 yards.
And, they had 400 yards the last game before he took over. And none in between. That's unbelievable. You can't make this stuff up.
So just no doubt, Matt Canada, bad at his job. We'll find out just how bad a job Frank was doing for the Colts. I'm also going to go, down here pretty cheap. Not quite as cheap, though. Gardner Minshew, 5,300 against our old friends, the Tennessee Titans. Minshew hasn't thrown a touchdown pass the last 2 weeks, so that's obviously not the most exciting piece of news if we're trying to play him this week. But, one of those games is the Patriots where, you score 10 points, you're guaranteed to win. So they didn't have to do anything too exciting. And against Tampa Bay, listen, he just didn't throw a touchdown. They scored 27 points. He dropped back 41 times. So it's not like the offense doesn't function under Gardner for the most part. There's the off game here and there. But the most important part is he's playing the Tennessee Titans. Week 5, he took over for an injured Anthony Richardson. Only threw 14 passes, got 155 yards in those 14 passes, 11 completions. Again, this is a Tennessee defense that funnels you to pass. On DVOA, which again, that adjusts for your opponents, the 30th ranked pass defense and the 2nd ranked run defense. So, as we'll get to with the Colts running backs, I think, there's value because Zach Moss's price, but he's going to have a tough go of it for the most part. Now, could he bust through that still? Sure. Zach Moss has been good this year. Hey, if you get within 2 yards, you just got to score touchdowns and we're golden. But most of the movement I think that we're going to see for this Colts offense is going to be through the air against a defense that, we're on multiple years now where they're good against the run. They can't figure out the pass.
They're friends of the pod, Joe.
They absolutely are friends of the pod. So, hey, I say fire up Gardner Minshew. I've got Lamar Jackson in one of my season-long leagues. I need a win this week. Minshew's the guy I'm turning to with my season on the line with Lamar on the bye. So, to me, that's the biggest vote of confidence is I'm like, hey, I've got to do it there. So I'm good to roll with him here and save somebody. And again, you can do the more expensive combo with Michael Pittman at 7,100.
Definitely do that. Or
you can go down to Downs at 5,100. And I think you're probably going to get a good return on either guy.
No, Pierce is the other guy, Joe. I'm telling you, Titans are they give up the least fantasy points to receivers in the slot. Again, look what happened to Thielen last week. I think if you want to save money, take Pierce, who actually is seeing targets. I think ran like a 96% route percentage last week. I say that, and Josh Downs will go bananas. But I really do like Michael Pittman.
I like that. That's good.
Lines up outside 70% of the time. If you're saving on Minshew, I think you absolutely should stack him with Pittman. But the RBs this week, Joe, I'm not sure if you're aware, but my man CM Punk is back in WWE. And his first promo in a WWE ring in almost a decade, he started out with a quote from my other favorite wrestler of all time, Bret the Hitman Hart, after he was away for almost, I think, 12 years from WWE that, well, hell must have froze over because they were back. And that's exactly how I feel by saying that Bijan Robinson of the My Atlanta Falcons, 6,700, is my median running back at the Jets. It's really not that difficult to see that I guess Arthur Smith has finally figured out he should use the guy that they selected over Jalen Carter, number 8 overall in this draft. It is risky.
What a thought.
I know that. He could end up throwing it to Jonnu Smith 10 times and only giving Bijan 15 touches. It could happen. However, this is a Jets D that gives up points to running backs, especially in the pass game, which is something I really like. That's why they're 28th on DraftKings. If you look most places in fantasy, they're actually ranked a little higher, but it's because of all the receptions that they give up. And again, we talk about volume. In the last 2 weeks, Bijan 38 rush attempts, 8 targets, 3 touchdowns. I expect them to lean on the run game a lot because the Jets still have a very good defense, particularly against the pass, and Desmond Ridder still seems to want to turn it over every time he drops back. So I like Bijan a lot. I think he's a real value at this price. And I don't even think, even after last week's big game, he has yet had that monster game that he is capable of. I think there's a good chance he does that on the big stage in New York this weekend.
Yeah, I definitely think if I'm the Atlanta Falcons, I'm 100% doing that because I don't want Ritter to drop back and throw against this defense as very much at all. Limit that as much as possible. And, yeah, give it to the spectacular running back you thought was worth the top 10 pick. But like you said, you can't ever feel good about it. I remember a couple of weeks ago, I was like, I think this is a good Bijan week. And you guys were like, and it was a good Bijan week.
It was a good
Bijan. I didn't feel, I wasn't like, you guys are wrong. This is the week. Because we've all seen what happened.
It's the same way a lot of people are going to feel in 2024 going to the voting box if we have the two candidates we do right now. It's like, I guess I got to vote for one of these two guys. So.
Right. You just suck it up and you make your choice. I'm going to go with, I think, becoming friend of the pod, Rachaad White, 6,300 against definitely friend of the pod, the Carolina Panthers. Rachaad White, I don't know if everyone's realized how consistent this guy is. 6 straight weeks, at least 15 points. Now,
15.9 points, Joe. Almost 16.
Let's not sell him short. Now, obviously, you only had the one big explosion game where he topped 25 points or even 20. It's like consistently hitting that like 16 to 18. It's like week in, week out. One exception was the Texans where, that game was just an awesome shootout. This game will probably not be an awesome shootout. As much as I do like the Bryce Young pick, it's hard to imagine both these teams topping 30 points. But again, upside for Rachaad, if this is the Carolina offense decides, hey, we can actually play, we're going to put up 24, 27, whatever, and the Bucs are down the whole game, great. We're getting those receptions. Multiple receptions in every single game this season. He's had a couple of 7-target games. So we're fine with that. But more importantly, last week we saw probably his best running of the season, 15 carries, 100 yards against the Colts. Now, I'm not going to tell you the Colts defense is, some indestructible thing. We should all be amazed that he did that.
But
I can tell you they're much better than the Carolina Panthers, who are dead last in DVOA. Now, they used to be a full-on funnel team, but they've dropped to 22nd in DVO against the pass, probably because the defense is just depressed from watching their offense play. It's hard to just give a shit at that point. But regardless, this is still a team where they're the easiest team to run on in the entire NFL. I do expect Carolina to be competitive in this game, but like I said, either way, he's either running it down their throats or if it's back and forth, more receptions for Rachaad. I said, the floor is incredibly high. Like, it's as high as, honestly, I would say, like most of the elite backs, because unless you're Christian McCaffrey or Derrick Henry, there aren't really that many guarantees. Austin Eckler's been kind of bad this season. Saquon has Tommy DeVito at quarterback, although they're on a bye anyway.
DeVito's look pretty good.
Well, it's all in comparison. And it's also like when you only give up 7 points, you can win it more easily.
That's fair.
But the point is, they're just running back is a crapshoot week in, week out. Like I said, like looking at this week, 100% McCaffrey you feel great about. After that, I think Rachaad White's floor is as high as anyone's. And, you don't have the same ceiling as an Austin Eckler or either Miami back. But I think we're guaranteed 15, and there's a reasonable chance we're getting 20 to 25. So I think cash games especially, I really like the Rachaad White play.
I agree with you so much. He is my median flex play. The only thing I want to add to it, because you made a great case, was the point about the rushing or the receiving. He's second in the NFL in snap share among running backs. He's on the field all the time. He saw 64 rush attempts the last 4 weeks. So to your point, they get up. He's going to get a ton of runs like he just will. He's going to get a bunch of carries. But he also had 14 receptions in that span. So, again, if they get down, it just means he's going to get thrown to a lot. So it's a double whammy. I love that. My value running back, no doy, but it's Zach Moss, 4,600 at Tennessee. If you listen to the DFS Den, and I always do on Fridays with Dave Eddy and Chris Robin, Dave, he has about 4 or 5 sayings that I love. I want to get a t-shirt made, but one of them is volume is king, and volume is king. I mean, it truly is, especially in cash games. The more opportunity somebody has, the more likely that they're going to score points. Duh. In the 5 games that he's had at least a 60% snap share or more on DraftKings, 4 rushing touchdowns, 5 total, 21.92 points per game. And at this price, he only needs 13.8 points to hit that 3 times number that we always look for in cash lineups. And I know what you said about Tennessee, and they are good. But in that first game, he put a 30 burger on him. So he's got to feel pretty good about it. And that was with Gardner Minshew for most of it. So, I mean, it's one of those that, again, he's going to be a probably crazy high owned. But in cash games, I don't know how you can't not have him in there, because I think he has the ability to score 20, 30 points, but I feel great about him at least getting that 15, 16 points, which is all you're asking for from somebody at this price range.
Yeah, I mean, I think the key is, well, like you said, he's been the one guy who really did go off against this defense in the run game. But regardless, it's like you have a good player. He's at the lowest price point of anyone we're going to feel remotely good about playing. Throw him in some lineups. It's that simple, because good players sometimes beat bad matchups. So
just like Chris, real quick, he says, "What are my sayings?" I know one of them is it's a beautiful thing, and what a time to be alive.
For sure.
Those are my 2 personal favorites, Chris. But we'll have to come up with that. I'm going to pay a little bit more attention Friday.
Start compiling all.
But I know that those are my 2 favorite of Chris. Because no, you don't, Chris. We love it, and we love your talking. Thank you for checking in. All right, Joe, who is your value? Is it Moss, or are you going somewhere else?
No, I am going somewhere else. Another guy that I've really been big on this year is Jaylen Warren, 5,400 against the Arizona Cardinals. Like we just said, this offense can suddenly move the ball. Now, they only scored 16 points last week, but they broke 400 yards, which
pretty good, again,
huge milestone for them.
Defense.
Yeah, Bengals. Listen, are they going to make the playoffs without Joe Burrow? Probably not. But still, I would say a top 5 defensive coordinator working with a solid roster. 400 yards, and especially, look, you're not taking risks in that game that you don't need to, because Joe Burrow's not on the other side. But, I mean, this is a guy who the 2 weeks prior, when the offense was still in that insane streak of not breaking 400 yards, had 2 100-yard games. Now, obviously, the big issue that's holding Jalen back from honestly just being a straight-up running back 1. It's just that he's
Najee Harris.
Najee Harris is still there. He's still, semi-ruining things for us. But, the reality is both guys are getting – it's a very clean split. There's not like some third running back who's coming in there and also screwing things up. Listen, player profiler, Jaylen Warren, 45 evaded tackles on the season. That's the most of anyone. His juke rate, which is basically the evaded tackles per carry, second highest. His breakaway run rate, which I believe runs over 15 yards, second highest rate at 10%. So, I mean, you just go straight up efficiency. I think probably the second most efficient back this season, obviously behind A-Chain, because that guy's still averaging like 12 yards per carry. But yeah, you have the second most efficient running back. You've got an Arizona Cardinals defense that is just not very good all around. I expect the Steelers to once again break 400 yards in this game. And again, also a guy who multiple receptions in 5 straight games. So
that's the big difference between him and Harris. And that's
exactly
because I agree with you.
This could totally be a Kyler Murray takes over game, because he hasn't fully had that game yet, but he's flirted with it. We've seen those flashes. So yeah, if this is a great game for the Cardinals, I actually think maybe we see more of Jaylen Warren than we would otherwise. But either way, this is a guy working at peak efficiency against a bad defense and an offensive coordinator that gives them hope for the Steelers. So yeah, Jaylen Warren under 5,500 is just like an auto play for me at this point.
I absolutely co-sign that. I think that makes a lot of sense. And again, both him and Harris are both really good values this week at their price against a very bad run defense. But completely agreed that the difference is, especially on DraftKings, if it was FanDuel, I might go Najee Harris. He gets a few more goal line carries. But with it being DraftKings, which is what we like the most with the PPR, 100% Jaylen Warren. All right, the wide receivers. I'm going to go to Adam Thielen this week, partly because I think he's going to be really low owned coming off just by far his worst game of the year. But I actually had a few people reach out to me on Twitter, which you always can, at Keith Flemming, for any DFS or fantasy questions. And they actually asked me about Adam Thielen last week. And luckily, because Scott Barnett, who is a great follow, puts out so much great information, one of them was fantasy points per game to receivers in the slot. The Titans give up the least fantasy points in the NFL. Adam Thielen lines up in the slot, the second most in the entire NFL among wide receivers. Only Josh Downs lines up there more. Last week, he saw a season low in targets, receptions, and fantasy points. This week, it's the inverse. He plays one of the worst defenses in the NFL versus slot receivers. The Bucs are 6th in fantasy points allowed to receivers from the slot. Josh Downs got 10 targets last week. Josh Downs, again, he is the number 1 wide receiver lining up in the slot, just ahead of Adam Thielen. And you're getting a guy that's 6,600, who I know he only had 3 targets last week. The rest of his games, 11, 10, 6, 11, 13, 13, 8, 14, and 9. I love Thielen. He's going to be in a majority of my lineups this week. I think he is a smash play. I think the Bucs are going to be up. That only helps him because Panthers are going to be slinging it. And again, the Bucs just really struggle with receivers where Thielen lines up the most. And it's been that way this season. If you look, most of his best games have been against bottom 10 teams versus receivers in the slot. It doesn't really take a rocket scientist to figure that out when, again, Thielen lines up a majority of the time at that position.
Yeah, I have nothing to say beyond I love that, everything about it, which is a big reason why when I was looking through this, because I saw that he was your pick, and I was like, all right, I don't want to go more expensive because I don't want to try to make any argument for it. I mean, there's not a lot of options in our price range more expensive, but like I like Nico Collins this week because I kind of think the Tank Dell Nico Collins thing is just take the cheaper guy every week and just see what happens. Because they're just both good. But do I like him more than I like Adam Thielen? I do not. So I'm not going to spend $200 more to do that. I flirted with taking Debo again, but Philly runs a pretty league average amount of zone and man. So I think that's a totally reasonable play. But I'm going to go with DeAndre Hopkins. I'm going to stick with this Titans-Colts game, which, please God, don't be like a 14-13 game. DeAndre, like you mentioned earlier, Zach Moss, he was the highlight for the Colts in that first matchup. DeAndre was the highlight for the Titans. 8 receptions on 11 targets, 140 yards against the Indianapolis Colts back in Week 5. Now, obviously, we haven't seen, the best DeAndre Hopkins since the QB switch. Kind of been alternating.
Well, unless you count the Falcons.
Well, right. So the Falcons, we got the huge 128 3-touchdown game. And then the 4 weeks since, 1 touchdown, 0 games so far with 5 receptions. So, there's a reason that DeAndre Hopkins is down here at $6,100, not, $700-800 higher. But, again, this is a Colts team, reasonable defense, not a great defense. And one that does give up a lot of targets to number 1 wide receivers. Now, according to FTN's numbers, the only team that gives up more targets to number 1 receivers on average would be the Philadelphia Eagles. So there's a little Brandon Ayuk argument for you because they have 12 targets per game to the number 1s, according to their numbers against the Eagles. But the Colts, very solid 10 targets per game. If you're telling me I'm getting DeAndre Hopkins and he's going to see 10 targets, I'm betting on DeAndre Hopkins every single time. And like I said, I also think this is a game where I think the Colts are going to have success on offense. I mean, I have their quarterback. You have their running back. Each of some of our plays here. I think they have one of the best play callers in the NFL.
I love Pittman this week. I like Pierce.
Yeah. If Pittman was 6,900, he would be my play here.
Yep.
So, the fact that we think the Colts will score points, because keep in mind, that first game where DeAndre gets 140 yards, that was a 23-16 game. And to your point, too, Zach Moss, 100 yards, that's a 23-16 game. There's so much more opportunity if these teams just finish drives. because I didn't look up that game, the box score. I don't know if there was a missed extra point or if there was just there was 6 field goals in that game. I'm kind of betting on the 6 field goals. So if these teams just finish drives, this could be a gold mine game for very low prices. So yeah, sign me up for. I think that's a great combo. Honestly, is doing a Moss Hopkins combo, because that way you're kind of playing like, all right, I think the Colts are going to be in the lead. Moss is pounding them in the run game. Titans have to throw. Obviously, if the Titans have to throw, we're always betting on DeAndre Hopkins over anyone else in that offense. So I think that's a sneaky cheap combo.
I completely agree. Real quickly, before I give you my value play, it is looking like Joe Flacco is going to be the QB for the Browns. And I know everybody laughs.
Yes.
I love Amari Cooper and Elijah Moore in that situation because Flacco can do one thing, especially for Amari Cooper. He has always had a great deep ball. Even his last run with the Jets, if you remember, Garrett Wilson had some monster games. What's his name? Corey Davis had some monster games. I would just, if it ends up being Flacco, I think I'm going to end up having Amari Cooper in some lineups because I think that's going to mean they're going to throw a little bit more and they're just going to take more chances down the field against a secondary that you can throw on. So, but my value wide receiver, Johan Dotson, 4,600 versus the Dolphins. I don't know how many yards Tyreek Hill is going to go for in this game, but it's going to be a bunch. The last 2 weeks, the speedsters on the Cowboys and the Giants, Darius Slayton and Brandon Cooks, combined for 8 receptions for 170 yards and 2 touchdowns. And I mean, to compare them to Tyreek Hill is laughable. I expect the Dolphins to score. However, the Dolphins lost arguably their best defender, their safety, Javon Holland. And that was not exactly a great secondary to begin with. You could talk me into F1 McLaurin, but I just like Dotson because of his price. I mean, he's 4,600 and he scored double digits in 4 or 5 games on DK. He scored a touchdown 3 of his last 5, 30 targets in that span. So he's seeing a consistent target volume. And again, like Howell's proved over and over again, kind of no matter what happens, he's going to throw for a bunch of yards. And I think this is a game that I'm going to try to have some game stacks with this. And I'm going to try to get creative probably where I have Howell, Dotson, and maybe, Logan Thomas, or maybe it's Howell, Dotson, McLaurin, and then run it back with Tyreek or Waddle. But I think there's going to be a lot of points in this game. That's really good for Jahan Dotson. And I think he's got a great chance again to hit that 3-4 times his salary point total.
Yeah, I like that one. And I'm actually going to kind of follow you to a degree. I got Curtis Samuel at 4,100 against Miami. Obviously, this is, it always feels weird to ever recommend a guy after he had his one big explosion game because you're like, is it going to happen again? Like, are you just an idiot who just looked at last week and like didn't realize that the guy scored 5 points combined the 2 weeks prior? No, I did look at that, and it does scare me a little bit. But I mean, the reality is, why did Curtis Samuel do so well? Well, one of the reasons is Dallas was lighting them in all the way till late. But yeah, it's Washington and Chase mode. They're going to be in this game. The one thing we know about Miami, they beat all the teams, usually crush all the teams that aren't great, and then they lose to the good teams. That's what they've been this entire season.
They're the Cowboys of the AFC.
Yeah, they really are. Although I think the Cowboys at least come like 1 yard short of being the Eagles. I think Miami still needs to get to that point. But yeah, they kind of are. And obviously Washington's not good. We know this because they lost to my New York Giants twice. So only a really bad team would do that. But yeah, so Samuel also, he's like much of this Washington offense, Terry McLaurin most notably. He was banged up earlier in the season, had a busted toe. So obviously last week suggests he is back. We know, we've gone over this like every week, Sam Howell is dropping back more than anyone in the entire football league. Eric Bieniemy, unsurprisingly coming from Kansas City, very pro passing the ball. And when you have a bad team, you're going to be even more inclined to do that. Other big thing, Miami, again, according to the FTN stats, 28th in yards allowed to wide receiver threes. So that's just another one for me where I want to get in on Dotson
Yeah,
Dotson
you may have just made me
Samuel.
pivot because I mean that's $700 I can use somewhere else. I love that, especially
I think
wide receiver 3.
And like we didn't, neither of us picked Sam Howell, but I think Sam Howell is actually a reasonable play even at 6,200. Now I like Purdy more, and he's $100 cheaper, and I think Russell Wilson might even be a slightly better play, which is why those were our picks. But I don't think Sam Howell is a bad pick because he's gonna throw the ball 40 times. He's actually been much better too about not taking sacks over the last month, where before it was like 6-7 sacks, what we said on the Thursday.
Falcons had 5 against them, for God's sakes.
But last week, we were all putting in our picks of how many sacks is the Dallas Cowboys going to get against Sam Howell. We're all like 7, 8, 9.
I won that with 5 by just having the lowest number.
So the fact that he's not getting sacked less has led to 5 straight games where he's attempted at least 44 passes, 6 straight 42. So if he's not getting sacked and he's dropping back 45 times, then we're getting 40 to 45 pass attempts. So to me, put one of these Washington guys in your lineup because none of them are expensive. Like McLaurin is 5,500. And obviously Logan Thomas is a guy we talk about all the time. So no one is expensive on this team. Put one of them in your lineup because at least one of these guys, if not multiple, will have good games because Miami is going to put 30 plus up on this team. So yeah, honestly, it's a great way to offset putting an A-Shane or, a Tyreek Hill, if Tyreek Hill suits up since he's questionable. But if you put one of those guys in, great way to offset it is just throw a Washington guy in there for cheap.
I love it. Like I said, it's probably going to end up being my game stack in the article for F6P tomorrow, but we'll see. I might change. The tight ends this week, a true treasure trove. I mean, seriously, I've already been messing around with a lot of double tight end lineups. I'm not going to talk about him, but I do want to say if Olave and Rashid end up missing with Michael Thomas out, I would be all over both Kamara and Taysom Hill because, I mean, good God, the volume. Like Kamara in the passing game, obviously Hill would be more likely to be targeted in the passing game, and they're going to run it with him. But Dalton Schultz, who again, he's questionable right now, so be sure to check that. But if he does play, this is so simple, 5K versus Denver. Denver is dead last on DraftKings, 32nd. That's not good. He has had 4 games, Schultz, this year where he's played teams 25th or worse on DK. In those 4 games, 79.8 points. That's 19.95 per game. 24 receptions. That's 6 per. 298 yards. That's 74.5 per. 4 touchdowns, and he scored in every single one of them. I think he is an unbelievable play this week if he ends up playing. And, I mean, seriously, again, Stroud has looked at him a lot. You look at the Falcons game. It was a prime example. I was so big on Atlanta, Atlanta's one of those teams, 25th or worse. I think he had like 7 for 100 yards and a touchdown. So I love Schultz, 5K at Denver for my median tight end.
Yeah, there are some very interesting ones. I mean, one that I was bummed he jumped so high is Pat Freiermuth, where sadly we didn't have one last week because I would have told people he would have been my lower tier guy at 2,900 and I would have looked like a genius when he went for 24. But the fact that he jumped over this guy makes this guy my play. It's David Njoku at 4,100 against the Rams. Now, Njoku, for an offense that hasn't been very good this season for the most part, he has 6 straight double-digit games. 6 straight games where he's given us at least 4 receptions on at least 6 targets. And
you see the total number of targets in those? It's like 56 targets.
It 15 targets against Pittsburgh and 9 in the 2 games bracketing that. So, yeah, the last 3 games, that's 33 targets.
It's 56, I think, the last 5 or 6. It's the last 6 he's averaging 56 targets, 9 per. Yikes.
Yeah, so
volume.
I agree with you that I think if it's Flacco, I think we're upgrading the wide receivers. But with Njoku, it's like we don't need an upgrade. Like I feel good regardless of whoever is back there. I think, he's finally having that. We've talked about this before. We're tight ends. Sometimes it takes a while.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is a highly drafted guy. He seemed like a big disappointment. Cleveland re-ups him smartly because they realized this is a talented dude. I mean, 7th in target rate, 8th in route participation among tight ends. You know, just a really solid player who would look better, I'm sure, if he had, you know, a more functional offense around him. If they hadn't sunk $50 million a year guaranteed into a guy who no longer seems to be good at football and can't stay healthy anyway. And also you're facing a Rams team that is not good against tight ends, quite notably. Where'd my numbers go here? I got way too many tabs open. This is always my problem. But yeah, the Rams have given up over 100 yards twice to tight ends this season. That was against the Colts and the Eagles. So obviously the Eagles, you're like, oh, that's an elite tight end. Colts, no elite tight end there. They gave up 100 yards and 2 touchdowns to the Colts tight ends. So, and they're coming Cardinals, 8 for 86 on 11 targets last week against the Rams. Now, this is a very heavy zone defense. Tight ends, if they're good tight ends, are great at finding holes in those zones. And yeah, Njoku is just week in, week out. This guy is giving us 10-plus points, and he's still 4,100. Like, he's one of those guys where, you know, double up on tight end. Put him in the flex. You know, do an Njoku-Schultz combo. That's 9,100. You're getting 2 bottom 10, well, the worst pass defense against tight ends, and another one that's bottom 10. And 2 guys that you feel amazing about giving you double-digit points at, like, what guy under 4,500 at wide receiver or running back do you feel like, oh, I feel good about that guy giving me points this week? No, you're taking a shot in the dark. And Njoku's not that. So, yeah, fire him up.
I love it. My value play, I know this will shock people that have listened to the show all year. One of the advantages of watching your sorry-ass football team play week after week is you know what they're good against and what they're bad against. My Atlanta Falcons cannot cover tight ends. I've been saying it all year. It's the reason that, like, I've had Schultz and Otten and all these guys have had these Hayden Hurst week 1, these guys that have big games out of nowhere because they're playing the Falcons. They can't cover. We were reminded again last week, Juwan Johnson and Taysom Hill, 100 yards on 4 receptions. Not exactly the 2 best pass-catching tight ends in the world. No offense to either one of those guys. Conklin, seeing consistent value his last 4 games, 21 targets, 19 receptions, and the first start by Tim Boyle last week, which we expect him to play again this week. Only Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson saw more targets. So he's the number 3 option in that pass game right now. And again, just to remind people how bad the Falcons are versus tight ends, I understand they're 25th on DK. They've not played a murderer's row of tight ends. Like, if you look week after week, they really have not played any elite tight ends this season. I mean, I guess Schultz would probably be the one, I guess, maybe exception. But Hayden Hurst week 1 scored 15 points. He has not scored more than 7.5 cents. Cade Otton in week 9 scored 24 points. He hasn't scored more than 10.4 points in any other week. This is how bad the Falcons are. And I also actually expect the Falcons to be up, meaning the Jets are going to have to throw. And we're pretty good against the run this year. It's not the way it used to be where I don't expect Breece Hall just to go bananas. Believe it or not, it's more Garrett Wilson that I'm worried about because we can still give up some big receiving yards to number 1 receivers. But I really like Conklin a lot at 3K because, again, Dave Eddy talks about it all the time. You're looking for 3 to 4 times, right? So 3K, we're talking 9 to 12 points and you're golden. But I believe he has every bit of the chance to do what Hayden Hurst did week 1 and score 15 points. Or Cade Otton in week 9 and score 24. So love Conklin. 3K is my value tight end.
I mean, yeah, we always love, well, I mean, we love and we don't love picking against our own teams, but
might as well profit off of it, right?
We know the weaknesses of our teams. We should. We watch them every week, regardless of how ugly it gets. So yeah, I will never argue against you when you're picking against your own team, and hopefully you will never argue against me. Well, hopefully one day we will actually. Hopefully we're like, no, your defense.
Our defense is good. Yeah.
One day we can dream.
I won't hold my breath, especially when you pass on Jalen Carter when he's sitting there.
Taking a running back all in the top 10 always works out great. I can tell you that as a Giants fan, it's led to just the promised land consistently. Logan Thomas is my guy. As I mentioned earlier, it's the opportunities there every week. Last week he was not the guy who got to take advantage of Dallas last week. But again, just because he's running so many fucking routes, second in the league among tight ends and routes run. Now they have played one more game than everyone else, but he's running 35 routes per game. For a number of teams, that's the total pass attempts. Obviously, for Washington, it's not, but he's running routes in 85% of their pass attempts. I mean, they're dropping back 45 times a game. And is Miami, a defense that I'm necessarily targeting against tight ends? No, they're not, but they're also not one that I'm remotely afraid of. They're 22nd on DK. And, you look through the stats, it's about right. DVOA says they're 26th. So just based on like when the tight end is targeted, they're actually even a little bit worse. So yeah, I think this is a defense that is it's whatever to bad against tight ends. And it's a guy who's in an offense that's going to throw 45 passes in this game. And so once I'm under that now again, I'd rather spend 500 and be like, David Njoku's giving me 12 to 15 points guaranteed. But hey, if you need that extra 500, you can never go wrong with Logan Thomas under 4,000 as long as this offense is functioning the way that it is.
Yeah, we've been from the beginning of the season telling people, not just for, DFS, but overall, he was a tight end number one, and he has been. I know he's had some bad games, but he's had as many double-digit games in PPR as any tight end that you didn't have to spend, like, say, a top 6 or 7 round draft pick on. So, love that. I said that Rachaad White was my flex, and he was, but let's go ahead and throw a bonus one out there.
All right.
Working a little bit on the fly here, but who also we like to pick on, Joe Matz, is those LA Chargers, especially versus running backs, which they still cannot cover. And they're facing Ramondre Stevenson and the New England Patriots. Say what you will about Billy Zappa. I don't think he can be any worse than Mac Jones. But they're 25th on DK versus opposing running backs. Stevenson, volume. He is seeing an average of 18 touches per game his last 6 games. In those games, he's averaging 16.3 points per game on DK. What I like, 3 of 6, 18 points or more. 2 other games, 13 points or more. So he only had really one just absolute stinker because, again, at 6K, we're looking for 18 to 24 points to be where we want. And what I love about him is just he's another one of those guys. He's got a really high floor because of all the receptions. He has 25 receptions in his last 6 games and saw 4 of his 6 receptions last week in the second half after they had made the change to Billy Zappa, who, if I remember last year, also threw to him at a higher rate than Mac Jones did. So I do like Ramondre Stevenson at 6K as well for my medium flex.
All right, I like the Ramondre call. Again, I think it's a smart play because if you watch when Zappa plays, I know some people have this like, oh, Zappa's so much better. They just run a bunch of wide receiver and running back screens. Like that's what the offense becomes.
Yep.
And it worked for one drive against the Giants. We gave up our 1 touchdown of the game. But yeah, this is not an offense that suddenly is going to start trying to.
And I expect the Chargers to be up. Was the other thing I meant to mention. And obviously, if that happens, that's even better for Ramondre.
If the Chargers aren't up, then I do think this will be the official end of the Brandon Staley era come Monday. So yeah, for their sake. I am just going to roll the dice. Like I said, Philadelphia, pretty even keeled on their coverages. But I just think I've got a fully healthy Debo. I feel a little bit better than him versus Kittle because they're literally the same price range at 6,200. I just think you look at what, Philly hasn't been good against tight ends either, but I just like it a little bit more against receivers because they're dead last.
And Ayuk is really risky. I didn't realize he's only been a top 20 wide receiver once since week 5. So I'm with you. I think Debo or Kittle is the way to go here.
Yeah, and the upside to Kittle too is there's always a chance he's going to give us a 20-yard rushing touchdown.
Yeah. I mean,
so even outside of the fact that he's facing the team that gives up the most yards to wide receivers, is that they're just trying to find different ways to get him the ball. I mean, God, every time we start talking about this team, I'm just like, oh yeah, and they have Christian McCaffrey, and that's obviously the risk, is that there's 4 honestly elite players on the skill positions on this team, and the only one every week is Christian McCaffrey. But yeah, like you said, I think if you're taking that bet on a guy who's not McCaffrey, because there goes all your money. I'm betting on Kittle or Debo this week, and I'm going to lean Debo. If someone disagrees and they want to go with Kittle, yeah, the two of them at 6,200, that just feels like a better play to me than going all the way up for Ayuk at another $1,000.
I've already got him in a few cash games, so I absolutely agree with that. My value, it depends, but it looks like Michael Wilson will miss again for the Arizona Cardinals. That means Greg Dortch at 3,300 at Pittsburgh is a smash play. He will be in every lineup at this price. You might say, Keith, why is that? It's a good question. In the last 2 games, Dortch played 70+% of the snaps, saw 17 targets, caught 9 passes, 10+ points in both in PPR leagues. That is a pattern that fits in with the same thing we saw last year. He had 6 games last year of 70% plus snaps. In those 6 games, 52 targets, 43 receptions. So let's pile all those games together and see what we're working with. 8 games with a 70% snap or more in the last 2 seasons, 8.6 targets per, 6.5 receptions, almost 15 points a game, which again, at his price, that's a 5-timer. I will say I do like Marquise Brown this week as well. Steelers run one of the higher man rates in the NFL. Marquise Brown smokes. Man, my concern is Steelers got a really good stud young corner named Joey Porter Jr., who has been shadowing the best receiver for the opponents and really shutting them down. Even more reason why I love my man, Greg Dortch. Rondale Moore is a good play too. He's also in this price range. The difference, though, is just 8.6 targets. That's an 8-game sample, including 2 this year, going back to 6 last year. You can't beat that. Again, volume is king, Dave Eddy, right? 8.6 targets per at 3,300. If Michael Wilson plays, you need to obviously reconsider. But if he doesn't, he will hit that 70% snap. He's going to be in every cash game lineup I got.
Yeah, we are 100% on the same page about this Cardinals game, because I remember looking at those man zone splits again. I was like, yes, Steelers run man. This is a Marquise Brown slam game. And then I was like, oh, Joey Porter might shadow him. So yeah, to me, 100%. I'm agreed. This is the play. Greg Dortch. If Michael Wilson is a no-go.
And it looks like he is, because he's still not practicing today.
And obviously, double check DeMario Douglas. I would be very surprised if he plays. He had a concussion, like you said. It's like Brock Purdy was like the only guy who cleared a concussion 1 week, and he looked awful that week, lo and behold. So that probably doesn't happen, which is a bummer, because again, he's been the one guy when it comes to the receiving that you could trust at all in that Patriots offense ever since Kendrick Bourne went down. I mean, when he got injured in that Giants game, he's at 6 catches for 49 yards and 9 targets. Yep. So guy missed the last quarter and a half, gave us a double-digit game. So
I was going to say,
monitor that. If he does play and sounds like he's good to go, I'd throw him in some lineups, but that's probably a wait till next week. So,
and again, I would pay attention to Elijah Moore too. I think he's 3,500 if Flacco ends up.
Yeah, I was going to say the 2 guys that you talked about, Dortch and Moore. I think you're going under 4,000. I don't think anyone else is even in the same tier as those guys as far as just taking. I mean, I guess, hey, if all the receivers are hurt, A.T. Perry for the Saints, maybe he's worth throwing in there, because they're going to have to throw to someone. And the Lions aren't going to stop scoring points, but that just feels risky. Where Elijah Moore's not bad. Greg Dortch clearly has great chemistry with Kyler. So I think you're under 4,000. Those two guys are the play.
All right. Since we missed the start of the showdown Thursday night game, we will not do a showdown lineup. But let's spend a few minutes before we close out the show defenses. I mean, is there any in the 30 or 3,000 above that you like? Because, we normally like to go cheap. For me, I'm looking at the Rams, Falcons, and the Jets. Maybe the Colts.
Honestly, right at that 3,000 range, I kind of like the Lions. I think.
Ooh. Oh, especially
you're giving me Derek Carr with no receivers.
That's
okay. I could see that going wrong in a lot of different ways. So I think right at that 3,000 range, I kind of like them. I think otherwise those ones you mentioned. I mean, listen, the Jets are still an elite defense. It's the only reason that team ever wins any games anymore. So I think they're a pretty obvious 3,500. I think you got to feel, and honestly, your Falcons. I think because the Jets offense is that bad. You could choose whoever you think wins that game. If you have some extra money at the end, I'd be okay with throwing either of those teams in. But yeah, I think when you're getting, I really don't like to go above 3,000, like you said. So that the higher range for me for probably where I'll end up playing teams, it would be the Lions.
But if I had to, if I am picking the defense that I'm looking at, so one we talked about earlier, the Denver Broncos, the Texans are kind of due for a bad game offensively. We saw a little bit of it with Stroud last week where he, threw a couple of bad picks. The Jags ended up winning that game fairly comfortably by the end. But, I mean, you look at this Broncos team. Since, week 5, they've given up 19 points in a loss, 17 points in a win, 9 points in a win, 22 points in a win, 20 points in a win, 12 points in a win. And they've scored the last 4 games 17, 8, 9, and 16 points. How do you do that? Turnovers and sacks. They have 4 games with 4 or more sacks this year. I like this team a lot. The fumbles, too, are crazy. They have forced and recovered 7 fumbles the last 3 weeks.
Wow. That's some nice little added. Part of it's luck, obviously, for recovery.
Sure, yeah.
If you force 7 fumbles in 3 weeks, I'd be like, hey, good job, guys. So the fact, I assume they didn't recover all the ones they forced, most likely. So that means they're forcing like 3 fumbles a game, probably. So that is an active defense, which.
And remember, this was a Broncos D that last year everybody had as one of the best in the league, and they were pretty good, but they disappointed a little bit
down the stretch because again, when one half of your team is just utter garbage, I think it's hard to keep it up. But the first 10 weeks, that was a top 5 defense last season, and now this year they've seemed to have just completely reversed what they did last year, where they would look like trash, like historically bad, mostly because of that Miami game, but not just because of it. And now it's like Kansas City can't score against them. And if Kansas, whatever you want to say about the receivers, Kansas City can't score against you. Hey, man, you can stop anybody at that point.
Is there any other defenses you're looking at? Because we're in that price range. Or is that kind of where you're at too?
As much as, I talked up, I think this is a good Rachaad White game and everything. Carolina Panthers, maybe take a shot. Maybe we've seen teams have that, the coach got fired and this kind of galvanizes us and we have that great first game and then normally trails down from there. People might remember Jeff Saturday won his first game. And then from then on, it went the way you'd thought about hiring a guy.
Who's the Raiders coach right now?
Antonio Pierce.
Yeah.
Won first 2 games. And so we could see that. Again, Baker Mayfield historically over the last few seasons, worse against zone defenses than he is against man defenses. Carolina runs the 3rd highest rate of zone. Brian Burns still exists. Should they have traded him for 2 first-round picks to the Rams 2 years ago? Yeah, probably, because they don't have any first-round picks now, and that's why this is the worst situation unless they can. That's why so much is on Bryce Young. But yeah, he's still there. That's a talented guy. Baker Mayfield's had weird games over the last few seasons that we've seen where he's just not good. So if you got to go super cheap, yeah, I think the Broncos and the Panthers to me are the plays. Patriots defense isn't awful. Justin Herbert's not a guy who turns the ball over a lot. And then obviously do whatever you can to avoid playing Washington's D. Like, can you have negative points on DraftKings? You can't, right?
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah, you can. You can. Because I was just saying the Cardinals one of those things I was looking at, they've had like 3 negative point games. I was like, nope, not touching that. I was gonna say,
like, I don't remember ever losing points on my defense, but yeah.
Oh, you do.
I'm looking here.
Washington
had -4 last week. Yeah. So don't do Washington. Like, I don't think you can leave it blank, but whatever you do, don't do Washington because I think you will probably lose points. So yeah,
are we
bump up above that
Browns
for sure.
At 3,100 at the Rams?
I'm not going to ever say the Browns are a bad play.
That's a pro Cleveland crowd. I guarantee you it's going to be a rowdy Cleveland crowd. And think about it, you live in Cleveland and you got a chance to go to LA to watch your football team play. There'll be a good bit of them there. I do almost wonder if that's like the layup we're missing. Again, too, the other one is the Colts. The more I look at it, they've scored the last 3 weeks 26, 16, and 11 points versus rookie QB, Mac Jones, Baker Mayfield, and they have another rookie QB.
That is true.
And by the way, week 2 versus a rookie QB, CJ Stroud, 9 points. So maybe there's a
15 sacks and 6 interceptions over those 3 weeks. So yeah, again, I think you can feel really good about a lot of those teams in that
only 3,200
low 3,000 range because, like I said, I think I really like the Falcons at 34. The Colts are a good play. Browns. I mean, you're not going to get negative points with the Browns. I'll guarantee you that. And then I think the Lions, with the Saints having no wide receivers, all good plays. And then I think if you're going cheap, I think the Broncos are the play or the Panthers. And whatever you do, find the money to not play Washington because just don't do it.
Yeah, I think I'm coming around on the Colts. I actually kind of like that stack too. You could do the Colts D and maybe run Hopkins back on the other side because they got to throw a lot, right?
Or do a Colts D Moss combo.
Could be a Colts D
because if
Moss Hopkins combo.
You could do all 3. I mean, that's one of those under the radar plays that I think people who've played this a while know. A lot of times the defense running back combo is the way to go because if you're thinking this team is going to be up all game, well, the running back might see 20 carries. So
sometimes a defensive wide receiver because like last week, right? Samuel, big game. Dotson scored.
Yeah, we're not worried about yards.
Right.
If there's turnovers and sacks, we're great. So if Will Levis has to throw the ball 30 plus times, I would feel better about Hopkins and better about the Colts defense.
All right. Well, that's week 13, boys. F6P NFL DFS Kickoff Show. Be sure to check out all the amazing work at fantasy6pack.net. Be sure to check out our guys. Yeah, we're calling them our guys. Chris Robin, Dave Eddy, tomorrow on the DFS Den. Chris, best in the biz at giving those real, I'm talking about, like we say value plays. He's talking about, as he quotes them, bottom of the barrel. We're talking cheap plays. It's amazing. He hits so many and gives you so much information on them. And then Dave Eddy is one of the best cash game specialists I've ever met. And I'm literally just a sponge. Ask him questions all the time. I know I'm driving him crazy, but I appreciate him being so nice and answering them all. And he would do that for you as well if you join the F6P Discord. So, but for Keith Flemming, that's at Keith Flemming. Joe the Brain Matz, that's Joe with an extra E, Matz on Twitter. This is the F6P NFL DFS Kickoff Show. Enjoy your weekend. Let's win a lot of money. See you guys.
Do it.